We finally made it, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to... Okay, technically it's not going to be the final episode of the Caspian Game Awards, because, well, I mean, this is going to be probably a yearly thing now as opposed to, like, a weekly thing, but... Welcome back to another episode of the Caspian Game Awards. And tonight, we are finally covering the year where we pretty much did the entire series throughout the titular 2024. I'll let you. Let's get that. Okay, there we go. I'm pretty excited to talk about this to you guys because, oh my god, this is gonna actually be a pretty interesting year to talk about for you guys, because 2024, a lot of people have opinions on, but you may not expect my answer on that. But of course, we'll get that into a little bit. But before we actually get into this, for anyone who's new to this series, basically, this entire series was me going through the past 35 years in gaming history and doing my own Game Awards show, with some of the ones in the 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s, basically commenting on the actual Game Awards. As well, the point of this entire show was just my visceral reaction to the 2023 Game Awards, and how I was really not a big fan of what they were doing. And so I decided to pretty much go through the entire throughout 2024, I went through all of the years of gaming, as far as the Game Awards are concerned, and even beyond, just to kind of give my own personal assessment and my own, awards to specific games and whatnot. And I guess that really does raise the question, because I'm pretty sure at the very first episode, which was the Caspian Game Awards 2023, I asked the question: would the Game Awards eventually improve over time? Well, I'll answer that in a second. But before we get into this, I just want to genuinely thank everyone who has supported this series ever since we started this over a year ago. Unfortunately, Goldie was only ever available in the first episode. I did ask him if he wanted to join in tonight's episode, but he couldn't. But that's fine. He said he's not really as passionate about video games anymore. But I still am, because I'm someone who wants more new experiences to be released, especially considering that a lot of games that tend to get a lot of attention can be pretty mixed with people. And I want to make sure I can share a lot of games for you guys that, honestly, I think are actually pretty cool. So... And I guess just going through this entire show, just talking about the hundreds of games that we've talked about, it's honestly been one of the most interesting deep dives I've ever done. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about 2024. Now, and yes, we are going back to pretty close to our original format, where we'll be comparing our own categories to categories that the Game Awards actually had. Which, of course, leads us into the Game Awards question. Well, if you guys remember, me and a few people that I was with, we reacted live to the actual Game Awards. So, and I'm just gonna be blunt, it was awful. Like, there are some people who were praising it, saying like, "Oh my god, this is one of the best they've ever had." I hate being that guy. I really hate being that guy. But not only did I think that the way in which they present, not only was I kind of questioning quite a few of the games that they had, and they still had some of the weird categories that I've never really been a big fan of. Like, for example, let me look up exactly the categories that they had, because I've always been a huge critic of some of the categories that the Game Awards has had over the years. Like I'm fine with, the Game of the Year, narrative, art direction, stuff like that. Score and music, We don't rank those, but I can understand why they would do that. Best performance, all that fun stuff. But then there's like weird categories like games for impact, which I never understood what the hell that was meant to be. I think it's supposed to be like a narrative thing, but they already have best narrative. So I don't know, it just feels a bit too redundant. And also best indie game and then best debut indie game, which I also does kind of feel redundant, especially since a lot of the indie games that they even have, they tend to be in like on both lists. So, oh, and also best ongoing game, I've never been a big fan of because, you know, that could age like sour milk, as we've discussed multiple times. Oh, and also best action versus action adventure. Again, these are just weird categories. So there's that problem. And then there was the problem of them basically spending more time on advertisements than they were actually giving out awards. Like, I'm pretty sure I saw like six ads for that piece of shit Fortnite game that, like, I've been a huge critic of that fucking game forever. I'm not gonna go on my whole fucking tangent on that, but like there were like 6-7 goddamn ads on that game alone, and it pissed me off. That, and also them repeating repeating the stupid PC game giveaway bullshit. Like, I'm sorry, but like if I am watching an awards ceremony, I want you guys to dedicate the time for the actual awards, because they've spent so much time on advertisements that they just completely had to rush through like over half the awards. It was so goddamn annoying and frustrating. So yeah, no. This year, in my opinion, it was awful. So, now, that being said, 2024... I've been alluding that 2024 was not really a good year for video games. It was definitely a year where a lot of bad releases came out. And I mean a lot of bad releases. Obviously, we can go on and on about stuff like Skull and Bones and Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League, about how out of touch those companies are with their things. Unfortunately, the biggest stamp in this year, like for 2024, as far as, you know, terrible gaming releases, unfortunately, is going to be the release of... Oh my god, I can't even remember the name. Oh yeah. The release of Concord. The biggest failure in video game history. What is it, like $400 million went down the drain? Or some insane number like that? Like, unfortunately, because those 3 releases alone, and obviously a bunch of other, you know, releases that had terrible launches and stuff like that, I'm not gonna lie, I think in the public consciousness, 2024 is going to be remembered as being a pretty bad year. Then we go to the indie side of things, and holy shit, actually, I take back a lot of what I said, like, was alluding to, because 2024 may have been a very bad year for, like, AAA releases, but the indie and AA scenes were actually carrying so much. And I'm going to prove that to you guys, because that's something that I've noticed a lot of people always talk about is, oh, the indie and AA scene tend to be pretty, you know, good. But they never give examples. Tonight, we're going to change that. And I'm going to give you guys a ton of examples of AA and AAA games that were pretty damn awesome, as well as some AAA games here and there. But indie and AA games are definitely going to be carrying the weight for tonight. Because surprisingly, they actually made 2024 a pretty worthwhile year. Even if I do think that 2023 was still technically the better year, 2024 was actually not that bad, if you know where to look. So, but let's get into that. of course, we got to go through all of the rules, and we've basically combined all of the rule sets that we've had in the past 35 episodes, and I finally laid them all down right here. So, as far as our nomination rules, so first of all, we cover the entire year. We have to make sure that a game is released between January 1st and December 31st of that year, because, well, we're not the Grammys.
Don't yell at me, yell at the Grammys.
We're not like that. And we're not like the Game Awards either, where they had some games from last year nominated. We're not stupid like that. Also, we're adding, since this is a newer year, we need to make sure that games that we're nominating, they had to have had at least a decent to good launch. Games that were fixed after the fact, I'm only going to nominate if it's like a case-by-case scenario. Which, there weren't too many games, except for maybe one, but I might add that once we get to the category. But anyways, also no early access games, because a game is not fully complete by that point, so keep that in mind. Only 4 to 6 nominations per category. Initial releases is the release date that will count. So if a game is not released on, like, if a game is not released here yet, or if a game is released on one console but wasn't released on a different console, we're counting the original release. So, also 1 game per franchise per nomination. As far as DLC / expansions, we're only going to be giving out the awards for those for games that weren't released this year. And, well, unfortunately, considering some bullshit that happened this year, I have to add a new rule. Considering that we're now in the era of AI art, we are not allowing games that have confirmed to have used AI art in the game itself. I'll get to that when we get to that. So those are our general nomination rules, like, for this episode. And then as for Game of the Year, basically just needs to be generally liked by the gaming community for us to nominate it. If absolutely necessary, I'll just start nominating games that I personally liked. And, well, it has to be a completely new game. So no remakes or remasters are allowed for Game of the Year. Because, well, it is a remake. It is not an original property. Or a new sequel, prequel, or original release. Or spin-off. And also keep in mind that, yes, this show is extremely biased because I'm someone who has certain grudges against certain games, whether because I don't like their aesthetics or I don't like their gameplay, etc., etc. And so because of that, keep that in mind. And of course, keep in mind that all this is just my personal opinion. If you disagree with me, that is completely fine. But either way, let's get to the categories. So we've got ourselves indie, action-adventure, role-playing game, shooter, sim strategy, multiplayer, the return of the DLC / expansion, well, I guess indie's a return as well, return of remake remaster, return of, art direction, return of best narrative, and of course the game of the year, as well as the return of the platformer category, after, technically, return if we're going by, like, chronological, because we did... I might have to kick her out. Lovingly. But, I didn't do a best platformer game category for 2011 to 2023 because, well, platformers were kind of gone for a long time. But 2024 basically was the return of that category. But we'll get to that when we get to that. But yeah, either way, let's start off with the best indie game category, which, as I've already listed, was one of the categories that was in the actual Game Awards. And typically the Game Awards are mostly good with this category, though it's not like something that they always get correct. Sometimes they might just choose games that were just popular at the time. But what do they choose? Some decent games here and there. I definitely would say like the best games in this category, at least for me personally, would be Animal Well, Lorelei and the Laser Eyes, and Neva. So Animal Well is actually both Animal Well is like a Metroidvania style of game. Takes a lot of inspiration, at least aesthetics wise, from a lot of NES games. Or at least that's kind of the vibe I get. It kind of does remind me, weirdly enough, a lot of like Cave World. Or was it? Sorry. Yeah, this is what it's called, right? I talked about this. Okay, I'm sorry. I'm thinking of something else. But anyways, but yeah, like, kind of gives me those aesthetics, and it's kind of a decent Metroidvania. Granted, it's a lot less combat focused, and it's a lot more explorative based, which is a unique take on Metroidvanias, and so I'm willing to give it a pass on that regard. And then we got ourselves Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Ironically, a game that I've actually probably talked about more times than I probably would remember. Because we've actually talked about this game a lot in our old Sly and podcast series when we talked about E3, like our E3 streams. And it was a game that always piqued me because it has that sort of like that's not NES, has like that sort of like PS1 survival horror look to it. It's not a survival horror game, it's actually a puzzle game. And I just always kind of liked the look of this game. And, well, the fact that it got a nomination here, I think speaks for the talent that was put into that game. And so, yeah, I'm pretty happy that they actually did nominate this. So, yeah. And then as far as Neva, it's another pretty standard platformer game, from what I can tell, but it's very much carried by its beautiful 2D looking hand-drawn art style. I think it looks pretty cool, and I can definitely see why some people would definitely attach themselves to a game like that. And so, yeah, no, in a weird way, yeah. Oh, by the way, I was thinking of Cave Story. Sorry, there's so many games I've talked about over the years, so. But yeah, like, as far as that's concerned, yeah, Neva. Yeah, pretty cool. And then, well, we've got ourselves these other games. So let's talk about UFO 50 first. It's not, okay. This is kind of where my bias starts to come in a bit. This game also has a bit of a, like an old 80s NES look to it. But unlike Animal Well, where I thought it kind of did a bit of an interesting take on that look. And also, it's a lot more, I mean, it's mostly set in, like, the woods and, like, some, like, ancient ruins. UFO 50 is a lot more of a contemporary game, and I don't know, it's the art style. It's just not really for me, you know? I don't know, it's just, I guess it doesn't really help that it's less of like a cohesive, like, you know, one genre game, and it's more of a collection, it's more of a mini game set game, you know? That's not really my thing. So, I don't know, I've never really been like a big fan of mini game style of games like that. So, unless if it's Wii Sports, which, you know, it's a lot more involved there. So yeah, it's just not really my thing. And then, well, this is probably, and as far as this next game, this is probably going to be my biggest hot take, or at least it's one of my biggest hot takes for tonight. I don't get the appeal of Balatro. I'm sorry. I know this game blew up on Twitch. It was like a Twitch darling. Like, everyone would not shut the fuck up about this game. Like, it was like one of the most top played games on Twitch. And I'm pretty sure it was one of the top, like, streamed games on YouTube as well. It's just a fucking card game, though. Like, is there... And not only a card game, it's also a roguelike card game. Now, that's not to say that, like, those can't work. Because I'd say Inscription was definitely a good example of that. I mean, we talked about that game in our 2021 Caspian Game Awards. And I thought that that game did enough with that to where it was interesting. But the poker aesthetic and the fact that, like, it's, again, it's mostly just the aesthetics. I don't know. I guess I'm just also sick and tired of seeing that fucking Joker character. That's what it is. I've seen that goddamn face so many goddamn times. It's so annoying to me. So, and also, it's just another one of those games where a lot of people just fucking praise this game to the fucking moon, and I just got really annoyed by it because of that. So, it is admittedly mostly a me thing, but, like, even then, I'd argue this is not like a top tier game for 2024. Absolutely. Not even in the top 30. But, well, as much as it pains me to say, it was the winner of this award. So, yeah, no. I hate being the contrarian, but this right here, we're back to Hoodie-itis. We're back to Hoodie-itis with this one. So, the worst choice being the winner. So yeah, no, I'm gonna get a lot of comments already on just this one alone, but trust me, there are some other good games that released in 2024. As a matter of fact, we're gonna talk about them right now. So, I'm keeping Lorelei and I'm keeping Neva. Animal Well, I did replace, but I think there's actually a game that did that style a lot better, but we'll get to that in a second. So, first of all, let's talk about these first two games here. We got Universe Sim. This is kind of a sort of a life sim strategy hybrid game. Which is a genre that unfortunately we don't really see a lot of anymore, and that sucks because life sims, unfortunately, they're kind of monopolized by, well, EA right now. Thankfully there have been some attempts to finally get away from that. And Universe Sim, I think, is definitely one of the first examples to try to at least break away from that mold. And I think what even helps with this game is its sort of unique way in which it does progression. So yeah, because it's also because it's like a weird mix between like a life sim and like a city builder. So if that's kind of something you're interested in, go check out Universe Sim. I think it actually is pretty cool. And you know what? Usually I wouldn't be someone who would be interested in survival games all that much, especially like more 2D survival games, but I'm gonna be honest, Core Keeper is also kind of an interesting little hidden gem that released earlier this year. I'd say probably the best comparison to this would be like a mix between it may look like it's a Minecraft clone. It's not. It actually has more in common with Terraria, I'd say. It's like it's basically if Terraria was on a more flat plane. So And I don't know, the art direction looked interesting to me. Gave me a lot of, like, Super Nintendo vibes. So, I don't know. If that's something that interests you, go check it out. But yeah, if you thought Animal Well was a pretty good Metroidvania, well, I'm just gonna be straight up. Nine Souls, this game got snubbed. This was a game that... Oh, wait. Sorry, I guess I'm kind of confused on where the camera is. Nine Souls. Nine Souls was a game that definitely got snubbed. This game was fucking beautiful. Like, first of all. But also, this game is it's kind of like Hollow Knight. So if you really, really like Hollow Knight, but you want it to be a bit, like, if you want to have a different aesthetic, Nine Souls is definitely for you guys. Definitely a lot of, like, anime influence, as you can probably tell by that, like, cover there. And, I don't know, it's just a game that, like, I'm kind of surprised the Game Awards just straight up just ignored. Like, what the hell? This game blew up just as much as, like, something like Balatro. I don't know. It's just it was bizarre. But either way, we're nominating it here. But you know what? You guys know me as well, though. You guys know that I'm also someone who really loves their shooter games. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to also nominate Zero Hour. This is a tactical shooter similar in vein to SWAT and the older Rainbow Six games. Which, if that sounds familiar, yes, this game definitely does take a lot of cues from another game that we talked about before called Ready or Not. And this is a very interesting... Okay. I'll be back in a second. Sorry about that. Cats. They're definitely something. But anyways, Zero Hour. Funny enough, I'm pretty sure this game was actually in development longer, because this is actually by a Bangladeshi studio. And so, admittedly, like, that's still kind of a newer scene, and, like, that's still, like, a newer, like, thing as far as, like, video games in that country. And for, like, a first year, like, as far as, like, a first studio project, and as far as being, made by, like, what, like, a group, like, like, a team of, like, only 20 guys. Yeah, no, Zero Hour's actually a pretty good game in its own right. Yeah, like, people will call it diet Ready or Not, but that shouldn't be an insult. This game is actually pretty thorough in its gameplay. There might be some, like, weird hiccups here and there, admittedly, but as far as I'm concerned, this is a pretty good alternative. If you can't afford Ready or Not, Zero Hour is actually a pretty competent alternative for you guys. And you guys know me, like, if you guys have seen the series, you guys know how much I love these more CQB based shooter games, like these close quarters tactical shooters. I wish more of these were common. But yeah, those are our nominees for best indie game. So yeah, let's go over the winner. So, and yes, we got the envelope as always. So, the award for the best indie game of 2024 goes to Zero Hour. I know it's like it's the least, like, indie feeling indie game that's on here, because all the other games, you can definitely tell, are a bit more, like, they kind of have that sort of indie game vibe. But keep in mind that for the longest time, this was definitely sort of my style of game. And, or at least, like, I was always more of a fan of first-person shooters. Not to disrespect the other games, because, spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about those games quite a bit in some of our other categories. But I'm just a sucker for this type of game. You know, I fucking love older Rainbow Six, and I really love SWAT 4. And, you know, Ready or Not, I think is one of the best first-person shooters in recent years. And so I'm just kind of a sucker for this sort of hardcore CQB action. And it offers a decent amount of content too. You get like a ton of different weapons and a few new gadgets. And they do update the game just enough. They have slowed down some updates recently, and unfortunately because of that, the game has been starting to get review bombed. It still has enough for like of a score for it to be qualified here. But nonetheless, I do think that this game offers enough amount of content, and I mean this game offers a full co-op, like a full like co-op experience and a PvP offering. So, and well, this game is still pretty cheap. So if you guys want to pick this game up for $20, go check it out. All right, action adventure, but well, I'm gonna change something on that because that's no longer a qualifier. Yeah, you probably saw it was a platformer because that's its own category this year. So yeah, this is pretty much our miscellaneous category. So it's like just a general action or a general adventure game, action adventure, puzzle games, horror games. They go in this category. And the Game Awards did actually have this as a category. I mean, they kind of have to. And they actually had mostly solid picks. But let's talk about them. I say mostly, though. So I definitely would say that most of the games on here are pretty solid games in their own rights. First of all, Prince of Persia: Lost Crown. I actually really do feel bad for this game because Ubisoft has been on such a downward streak for like the past half a decade at this point. And seeing that of all of the absolute, mediocre or just straight up bad games that they have released, even if I like some of the games, but that's besides the point. Prince of Persia really is a game that stands out. Like, I'm just gonna be straight up. Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, it's really fucking good. And it's really sad to say that it's like the best thing that Ubisoft made since arguably Assassin's Creed Origins. Like, it's genuinely that good. And a return of a beloved franchise here. It really is just kind of sad seeing that this game underperformed. But regardless, I am so happy that there's at least some recognition for this game. Because, yeah, as far as them adapting Prince of Persia into a Metroidvania, this is easily one of the best ways they could have done it. And I'm very happy that, this game exists. Because, yeah. I'll talk about this stupid story later, but go support Prince of Persia: Lost Crown. It's actually a game that's worth it. And then we got Astrobot, a game that did spoilers, because I feel like I kind of have to spoil this one. This game swept the Game Awards this year. And for good reason, because, well, Sony was kind of in a weird spot. Well, they're still in a weird spot right now. I mean, obviously. And this game was definitely like the game that it's the game that stood out the most compared to a lot of what Sony's been releasing in recent years. Because Sony's been doing a lot of more single player heavy narrative based games, which that's fine, but they kind of stick to only like the same 3 franchises, which is super annoying. And well, a game like Astrobot, with its more lighthearted platforming, and it paying homage to pretty much the entire Sony license, Sony library of IPs, it really does just kind of beg to question why Sony hasn't really messed with either completely new IPs or messed with a lot of their older IPs as of late. It's really weird. But either way, this game, being a sequel to Astro's Playroom, if you guys remember, we played that whenever I first got my PS5. I thought that was actually pretty good. If a demo, still really cool, introductory game for the console. And having a full-fledged sequel to that is fantastic. So, go check out Astrobot. And then we got ourselves Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, a admittedly kind of out of nowhere release, at least for me, because this was a kind of a unique twist on Zelda. I mean, you actually play as Zelda in this game, and it's a lot more passive as far as its gameplay, something that Zelda games aren't really known for. And I think that that's actually a pretty cool take on Zelda as a whole. So if you like the more 2D style of Zelda games, but you want it to be a lot, if you want a Zelda game, if you want a 2D Zelda game that is less combat focused, I guess the Wisdom's actually a pretty good choice. And then last but not least, we got ourselves Silent Hill 2, a remake of one of the few games that has ever made me cry on stream. I'm gonna be honest, I was very hesitant with this game because this was being made by Team Bluebird, a studio that kind of made pretty mediocre horror games. But I'm gonna be honest with you guys, Silent Hill 2, they were able to deliver, blow it out of the water. They were able to be able to recreate one of the, in my opinion, one of the best horror games of all time, and create it for a more modern audience. And again, this comes from Bluebird Team too. So yeah, no, I definitely get the pick. Would I choose it for best action adventure game though? Because it's a remake, no, but it is still a fantastic remake of a pretty solid classic. So definitely check it out if you guys haven't. So really good games as far as I'm concerned. But of course, keep in mind that notice how I did add a platformer category, so you can probably guess where Prince of Persia and Astrobot are going to go. Why the fuck is Star Wars Outlaws on here, though? Yeah, another Ubisoft game. However, unlike Prince of Persia Lost Crown, this, unfortunately, is pretty much the status quo for Ubisoft. Pretty bland story, not a lot of side activities, and, well, having the dumbest combat ever in the game. Okay, this is so fucking stupid. This game was a stealth game, but it did not have stealth mechanics in it. Meaning, you had no stun guns, you had no, pulse stun grenades, or anything like that. You didn't have, electroshock things to, take down enemies. You have no suppressed weapons, because there's, only, one suppressed weapon in Star Wars, the DC-19. That's not available in this game. And, well, if you're detected, you have to restart from the checkpoint. It was a stealth game where you couldn't do stealth in it. How do you fuck that up? Now, I know they patched it since, but considering this game launched with that shit, I'm sorry. You fucked it up. So, yeah, no. Massive L of a release. Thankfully, it was not the winner. Objectively, the worst choice that they could have nominated, but thankfully, it's not Hoodie-itis. It didn't win. Astrobot was the winner. Even though, obviously, since the platformer, I would choose it as a best platforming category. This is a good choice if they were to just stick with action adventure. But if we're not going to be choosing Prince of Persia: Lost Crown or Astrobot or even Silent Hill, what are we going to choose? Okay, so Lower Line and Laser Eyes we're going to nominate here. But I'm also going to nominate Path to Goddess. So, okay, this one admittedly is an awkward one because it's kind of a strategy game, but it's also an action-adventure game. Like, there's moments where you do, like, hack and slashing in the game. So it's kind of a hack and slash, tower defense hybrid game. So I don't know if I wanted to include it in the strategy category, but I ended up choosing it here. And this game, I was actually already pretty excited about this game whenever it was first announced because of its really unique sort of demonic Japanese art style. I thought it looked pretty cool. And thankfully that helps complement the general gameplay that this has. So if you want something that... If you want like a hack and slash action adventure game that has a lot of emphasis on more strategy based systems, Path of the Goddess is actually not a bad choice at all. I definitely recommend you guys check it out. And yes, your eyes are not deceiving you with this next game in the middle. Dare I say, this game actually, I'm actually kind of surprised. So you guys know my history with Five Nights at Freddy's. It's a pretty complicated history. I mean, okay, all jokes aside, I am a FNAF fan, but more so for its aesthetics. This game, on the other hand, it was actually able to deliver. It's a 2D survival horror game, which, not that common to begin with. And while I definitely wouldn't say it's as good as something like Darkwood, it's actually still able to stand on its own. If you want something that... If you want, like, a survival horror game, that is on a 2D plane, and really, really requires you to know, really requires you to do a lot of stealth, this is honestly, like, I can't believe I'm actually nominating another fucking Five Nights at Freddy's game as, like, a best category. Because I only ever did that with the first game for best indie game. Or was it best game I did in studio? It was one of the two. But no, Into the Pit is actually a genuinely really good game. Even if it's technically not canon. Go check it out. You might be surprised. And last but not least, absolutely snubbed game from the Game Awards. We got ourselves Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. This game, it's because of when it released. Because this game released in December. And, well, the cutoff date for the Game Awards is typically like halfway through November. So, it may get nominated later this year in 2025, but I unfortunately sincerely doubt it. And so we're going to nominate it here. This game, I remember everyone was like thinking that this was going to be a joke whenever it was first announced. Nobody took this seriously when it was announced that Machine Games was making an Indiana Jones game. Like, nobody thought this was going to be good. Nobody. After watching the trailers, though, and even playing the game, everyone just shut the fuck up. This is actually a surprisingly really good game. It has some shooting mechanics, but that's not the core of the gameplay. Again, in order for it to be a shooter game, that has to be like a core mechanic, and that's not the case with Indiana Jones. You could just play the game just using the whip or just punching people, and you'll be fine. But yeah, no, as far as an action-adventure stealth hybrid game goes, that does take a lot of cues, surprisingly enough, from a lot of other first-person stealth games like Thief or Dishonored, granted, lacking the fantasy stuff. Yeah, no, this is a really good game in that regard. And I'm just going to say right now, Troy Baker killed it playing indie in this. Absolutely killed it. So yeah, no, go check this game out. Like, it deserves it. It's probably going to get snubbed. But we only choose one winner. We got some good choices here, but we only choose one. Unfortunately. But let's do that. So, the best action-adventure game of 2024, or the award for the best action-adventure game of 2024, goes to Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Definitely not as grandiose as Tears of the Kingdom, but it serves its purpose. And, well, I mean, it does enough things that are pretty unique that I think it is worth giving it the nod this time around. I mean, again, you're actually playing as Zelda this time around. It changes the perspective, like it changes the pace by just that alone, where you have to like find where Link is essentially. And even though that this game is more Zelda centric, the light sections of combat that it does have, it makes it to where it's a lot more puzzle and mechanic based, and I like that. It, funny enough, this might be a weird comparison. Yeah, I know I'm wearing the shirt that I'm going to reference, but it kind of reminds me of the bosses from Sly Cooper in this, or like something like that, in the sense that a lot of the, or like even actually, I don't even need to compare this. Something like what's another game that, basically it's a lot more mechanical based as far as fighting, like not only like the bosses but even just regular enemies. And I like that because sometimes defeating enemies, you don't have to just bash them with a goddamn sword. So having those options is always cool to see in a game like this. And I mean, this game does kind of have a cool art style. It continued the look that the Link's Awakening remake had. So, and ultimately, I think this is a really good mix between both 2D and 3D Zelda games. Obviously, it's still like 3D models, but it's on a 2D plane. So, but yeah, go check out Echoes of Wisdom. It'll be pretty fun. All right, now let's get into the platformers. So this is kind of weird that we're reintroducing best platformers for 2024 because, again, platformers were basically dead for over a decade. After like 2010, platformers just kind of died. Like they were just not in mainstream attention at all. And that sucks because, you know, platformers are some of the oldest, it's one of the oldest video game genres, just period. And we've talked about plenty of just fantastic platformers, you know, throughout the decades. And I guess the reason why I'm making this a category is I've noticed in this year in particular, 2024 really saw a big resurgence of platformers as a whole. And I think it's only fair for it to finally have its own category again. I don't know how long this resurgence is going to last, But considering that this was a big genre for a long time, I think it's only fair for it to be its own category. But what did we end up choosing? So I'm gonna choose games we've already talked about: Prince of Persia, Lost Crown, Animal Well, Nine Souls, and Astrobot. I think all 4 of those are fantastic choices for this. But even then, I'm gonna add 2 more. Take Bo, Path of the Teal Lotus, for example, which I know that the name does make it sound a bit confusing with Path of the Goddess, so bear with me on that. It's a completely different game. This one is more of a puzzle-based platforming game. Think something like Trine, but more 2D. And, well, as you can see, it does admittedly also kind of have a similar aesthetic to something like Nine Souls, or even like basically if Okami was 2D. That's kind of the vibe I get with Path of the Teal Lotus. It has that sort of Japanese like painting art style that it has, which does look pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. So if that's something that piques your interest, Path of the Teal Lotus might be for you. And well, this last game up here, I didn't choose this game by choice. Goldie made me choose this. you guys know he's a big furry, so. But to be fair, this game, Nicoderico, The Magical World, is actually not that bad of a game. It definitely takes a lot of influence from a lot of PS1, PS2 mascot platformer games. So if you like something, if you like, stuff like your Banjo-Kazooies or your Spyros or your Crash Bandicoots, you're more than likely going to feel at home with Magical World here. And well, it's probably gonna piss off a lot of people, but I don't care if I'm gonna say this. It's basically what like most people think Sly Cooper actually is. I know that might be weird to say, but I only say that because people consider Sly Cooper to be like a platformer series. It's not. Like it's more action adventure stealth. It has more in common with Splinter Cell and Metal Gear than it does, like, or at least like the later games. The first game is platform, whatever. Point is, if you want your furry 3D platformer, there you go. But anyways, I have a feeling you guys. There are multiple choices there are multiple games on here that you could definitely see me choosing. But I'm only going to choose one. Well, I can only choose one, so. Yeah. But here we go. So. The award for the best platform game of 2024 goes to Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This game needs more support. This should be a wake-up call for Ubisoft. Because holy shit, man. This game has no right being this good. I mean, as far as bring back a legacy IP of yours after 14 goddamn years. It took us over a decade to get a new Prince of Persia game. And in my opinion, they knocked it out of the park with this one. This game has some of the best feeling combat in any sort of Metroidvania that I've played. Because yes, this is in fact a Metroidvania take on the Prince of Persia formula. Which, yes, that does mean that this is technically kind of a return to the 2D Prince of Persia style of the original games. Although, thank God, it's not on a time limit. But yeah, no, this game has some really good fluid combat and tons of combos for you to be able to figure out as far as taking out enemies and the bosses. Granted, I will admit the bosses, they can be a bit um you know, spongy. That's like that is really kind of one thing that is annoying about this game, but like even besides that, this game is still fantastic everywhere else. And also, one good thing about this game is there's a lot of puzzles in this game where it's all, it's time based, where you create a clone of yourself to activate one portion of the puzzle, and then you use your second form to activate the other. It's basically their throw in of like, the Sands of Time stuff, or even this, like the reverse mechanics in the 2008 Prince of Persia. So it's kind of their shoehorn of that mechanic in here, and it works pretty well here. And well, I've already said this. It is a return to form for a franchise that was pretty much dead for over a decade. And that is kind of, unfortunately, something that is kind of annoying because, well, okay. I'm just going to straight up say this. This, as much as I think this game's actually genuinely really good, there is unfortunately, like, it shouldn't surprise you considering every goddamn game gets called this nowadays, but unfortunately, because of the fact that we've got ourselves a new Prince character here, and we've got ourselves a new timeline for the Prince of Persia story, unfortunately, and well, because, I'm just gonna be blunt here, main character's not being played by a somewhat white dude. This was unfortunately a game that on parts of the internet was being called the W word. I'm not gonna fucking say it because I hate that word with a passion now. And whenever I was, talking about this game on some of my clips on YouTube, I got some comments from idiots online who were basically being blinded by nostalgia and, saying that this game sucks. I'm just going to be straight up with you guys. Get a fucking life. Because this game is good. And, well, if anything, this should be a wake-up call for Ubisoft. Because Ubisoft has been on a downward spiral for the past at least 5 years. I'd argue past 7. And they really needed this to be a hit. The fact that this was not a hit for them is pretty unfortunate, because they need more games like this. They need more smaller budget games like this that have a lot of passionate build, like, that have, basically have more passionate games. That's my point. So yeah, go buy this game. Doesn't matter what platform. Any platform works. I heard the Switch version is actually probably the best, which, there you go. If you're a Switch person, there you go. Got yourselves another platformer there. But yeah, let's move on to the RPGs. This was an okay year for RPGs, I would say. Because the past couple years were kind of bad for RPGs. I think they're finally starting to kind of, kick it up a notch a bit more here. And, well, this was a category that was at the Game Awards. So, do the Game Awards at least recognize the best games to choose? Yeah, it's complicated. So, first of all, we got ourselves Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. So, it's Yakuza 8, essentially, is what it is. So yeah, it's the next mainline game, but they're actually calling it Like a Dragon this time because, well, that's what it was called in Japan. So, and yeah, no, as far as a continuation of the current storyline that's going on, following the characters that were in Yakuza Like a Dragon, I think this was definitely a good follow up to that story. Granted, this game doesn't take itself too seriously in comparison to some of the older games, or how even the previous mainline Yakuza game. I still think that this is a really good follow up. And I mean, it's helped with the fact that this game has is the first game, at least to my knowledge, to not take place in Japan. It has a section where you go to Hawaii, which is insane for the franchise at least. And I don't know, just kind of that. I don't know. I like how they're like, you know, changing up the pace at least a little bit, and even offering like a ton of new areas for you to be able to explore. I think that's pretty cool. So you're not just stuck in the district the entire game. So yeah, definitely like a game that I could definitely see be nominated. And then the other game that I can definitely see being nominated on here is Metaphor ReFantasio. I'm pretty sure this was made by a lot of ex-Persona slash Shin Megami Tensei developers. It has a very similar look. I know it's not a part of that franchise. I just know that it's, you know, kind of a similar game, both in its art direction and its gameplay. And as far as being kind of like another mix between contemporary, like a contemporary setting and like a fantasy sort of thing, I think it's kind of cool. I will admit it wouldn't be my first pick as far as best RPG for this year, because, you know, this year was a pretty decent year, I'd say, for RPGs. It's still a good enough of an experience. So if you are into a lot of JRPGs like this, you'll probably more than likely feel at home. And then everything in between both of those is complicated to talk about. So first of all, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth. This is the second game in the Final Fantasy Remake trilogy. So this is continuing off of what they were doing with 2020's Final Fantasy VII Remake, which was a fantastic remake in its own right. And while this game is definitely, I would say, is still also pretty good in its own right, there's one problem. And this is a point that I've argued with a bunch of people on, but I'm still going to stand on this point. This is still technically a remake. It may not be a full remake, but keep in mind this is adapting the second disc of Final Fantasy VII into full HD, because that was one of the complaints that people had about Final Fantasy VII Remake from 2020, is that it was only adapting like the first half of the original version of Final Fantasy VII. This was kind of not adapting the full other second half, more like 2/3, like the second third of the game. And so that could be seen as kind of iffy in some ways. But regardless, I do think that it is still a respectable game, even if I wouldn't nominate it here because of its remake status. And then we got these other two choices here. So, first of all, we got Dragon's Dogma 2. Now, I was someone who gave a lot of credit to the original Dragon's Dogma. It is one of the best games from that year, 2012. And it was a sleeper hit, like, which is weird. Although Capcom was kind of in a weird. Wait, this is Capcom. Yeah, this is Capcom. Capcom was in a weird spot in 2012, and that game didn't really get a lot of attention until much later. And they finally greenlit a sequel, and that's awesome because I think that Dragon's Dogma definitely had a lot of the potential for it to become another grand RPG series for Capcom. Because yeah, they have Monster Hunter, but as far as being a more traditional RPG, Dragon's Dogma is definitely a cool concept, especially since it basically combined a lot of elements from not just Monster Hunter, but also stuff like Final Fantasy, Elder Scrolls. Throw in some Shadows of the Colossus like boss fights in there. Like, it was a pretty cool mix of different ideas. And I'll even say this: Dragon's Dogma 2 is actually a pretty good follow-up to that game. I think that the world building was pretty good with this game, and I think that the general tone and gameplay design lives up to the original. There's one big problem, though. The launch of this game. This game, unfortunately, just like with Jedi Fallen Order from 2023, had a very rough launch. And unfortunately, because of that, yeah, people are saying that this game is bad. But unfortunately, just like with Jedi Survivor, yeah, I think it's not a bad game, people. I don't know. It's just, I don't like defending games that have rough launches. Again, at the end of the day, get your fucking launches right. But it's like, this game's not that bad. It's really not. But unfortunately, because it had a rough launch, we cannot nominate it. So, I think this game's cool. God. Whatever. It's still a decent game at the end of the day. But so yeah, unfortunately we can't really nominate that. Now, as for this last choice here, this was a huge controversy. And well, truth be told, it is really stupid that the Game Awards even decided this was a good idea to begin with. Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree. I don't think I really need to explain why this was a bad idea for them to nominate this. Not because this was a bad experience. Far from it. Because Shadow of the Erdtree, as far as expansions or DLCs go, this is arguably one of the best ones that we've had in recent memory. Like, this expanded so much to the game that I can at least see why they wanted to nominate this as its own game. But notice what I just said. As if. Because it's not. It's a DLC/expansion for Elden Ring. It is not a full-fledged sequel. As a matter of fact, you have to have the original game in order for you to even play Shadow of the Erdtree. It won't work if you just buy the DLC. You have to have the base game in order for you to play it. That's unfortunately the problem. So, yeah, that's unfortunately the crux of the problem. It's another Witcher 3 Blood and Wine situation here, where they tried nominating that as the best RPG back in 2016, when it's like, it should not be nominated for that. That's a DLC. It's not a new game. You have to own the base game. It's the same problem here. And again, that's just they need a DLC category. I don't know why they are not bothering with that. Obviously, we'll get to our DLC category once we get to it, but man, it's so annoying that they keep doing this shit. Like, stop nominating DLCs for games, because they're not the same thing. Thank God it was not the winner, by the way, because if this was the winner of this, even just this category, oh my God, the internet would explode. So, and thankfully, Metaphor, that was the winner. But what other games should we nominate? If we're not going to nominate Dragon's Dogma, Final Fantasy Rebirth, or Erdtree, what can we nominate? Well, first of all, Rise of the Ronin. A game that I'm kind of surprised was also another snub at the Game Awards, because this game, as far as I'm concerned, was a big success for Sony. Like, I mean, at least it was a PlayStation exclusive for a while. I don't know if it was actually like a Sony proper game, but I'm pretty sure, like, it did pretty well. Like, yeah, it's a team. Yeah, okay, yeah, it is a Sony game. Okay, yeah, like, as far as a Team Ninja game is concerned, yeah, like, this is a pretty good sort of it's not really like a Souls-like, because it's not. It definitely takes some cues from their previous RPG games, like Neo, but it's a lot more of just traditional samurai based RPG. It does play it pretty safe, but I still think this game is pretty cool, not just because of its setting, but also just because of just the main, like, just it's okay. It's a pretty just standard 3D RPG game, but I still think it's worth talking about. And the fact that it got snubbed is just so bizarre. Like, why? So, I don't know. Go check it out. And, well, going back to JRPGs proper, Visions of Mana, which, yes, this is in the same lineage as the very, well, infamous Secret of Mana. After a long string of not very good sequels, we finally got a Mana game that actually does kind of live up to the name of the original game. So, I don't know. Mana, unfortunately, was kind of one of those troubled JRPG franchises that Square had that was kind of... It kind of went in weird directions. But it does seem like they finally recuperated themselves after they did all of the remakes of all their Mana games, and they finally released a sequel, like a proper sequel. And yeah, no, this game I think is pretty cool as far as newer JRPGs are concerned. And if I remember correctly, like, this game does look pretty good, especially for yeah, like a 3D JRPG. Yeah, like, these worlds look really damn good. Kind of gives me, I don't know. I guess it's weird because I guess I also just kind of like the whimsical, thing that they got going on. So yeah, no, Visions of Mana. If you want something that's JRPG that's kind of cool, there you go. It's definitely a better alternative than Genshin Impact. Don't at me. So, oh no. We'll talk about Mario and Luigi in a second. My goodness. God. You're a Miss Grumpy Pants, aren't you? You like interrupting us, don't you? You like interrupting us. Oh shoot, okay. You're not happy. Okay. Cats. Cats are definitely okay, don't do that. Okay, anyways. Yeah, we gotta get this quick. So, anyways, Mario and Luigi, Brothership. I'm nominating this, and yes, this is the long-awaited continuation of the Mario and Luigi line of RPG games. I will admit, it's definitely not the best in that sort of line of games, but it's just like kind of a cool return to form of like a sub Mario series that hasn't been around in a while. So, and also, I can't think of the last time we had like an actual Mario RPG. I know that there is the Super Mario RPG remake. That did it come out? I don't remember if it came out already or not. Let me double check. But yeah, like if you like the older Mario and Luigi games. Oh, I'm fucking stupid. Yeah, it did come out. But yeah, if you like the older games, there you go. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, didn't I talk about this game? Yeah, I'm fucking stupid. We talked about this before. Whatever. Okay. Best RPG. So, the winner for the best RPG 2024 goes to Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth. Again, I do respect the other RPGs on here, and I do respect Metaphor ReFantazio in some ways. However, I'm not gonna lie, the Yakuza series, the Like a Dragon series, was definitely kind of more my vibe. And so, and as someone who is admittedly a newer Yakuza fan, I think this game is actually pretty cool. It does go away from the real-time combat in favor of more of a turn-based combat system, but which I think that wasn't that a thing. That's been a thing in some of the more recent like Yakuza games as well, but I think it actually works in this game's favor. It's not really anything that I think was bad. And so yeah, I definitely do think that this is it was a decent sort of change of pace, especially for a game that has a bit more of a contemporary setting. So yeah. Also, I mean, I already mentioned I like the fact that they did actually go outside of Japan for like outside of Tokyo for this one. They actually went to the States, which is interesting for a Yakuza game. And yeah, the narrative doesn't really take itself super seriously, but I still think it's enjoyable. So, definitely a good continuation off of Like a Dragon story. Like Yakuza Like a Dragon story. Alright, so best shooter game. A category that was not at the Game Awards, but we're gonna have here. Unfortunately though, this year, I'm not gonna lie, it was really rough trying to find enough games for this category. Because yeah, obviously there were the big high-profile games, but man, this is gonna be a rough one to talk about. But let's bring up what we ended up choosing. So we're gonna nominate Zero Hour here, because of its tactical CQB combat. But it should not surprise anyone that I'm also going to be nominating Helldivers 2. I've streamed that game so many times in the past, like, 5 months. Like, it's honestly become a game that I really do respect. And that's weird considering that I was not a fan of the marketing of this game, because I thought the marketing was so cringy. But usually that would just completely turn me off from a game. But this was an exception. I think this game was able to like. I mean, it's weird for me as well because I actually knew of Arrowhead before they they really blew up with this game because well, they made the Magica, like they made the first Magica and obviously the first Helldivers. And I thought those games were actually pretty cool in their own right. And so for them to basically transition into a fully fledged third person shooter for this game was definitely kind of a smart move in a weird way. I know that sounds weird to say, but I don't know. We don't really get too many third person shooters anymore, or really just I feel like ever. And thankfully, this was the game that was able to do that. And also just the fact that there's just so much stuff in the game that you can do. I mean, watch any of my Helldivers 2 streams and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. And it's helped by the fact that this game has a variety of enemies for you to fight. And this game has constant updates rolling in. So that's always nice. Definitely a cool Starship Troopers 40K inspired game. Which, speaking of 40K, the long-awaited sequel to 2011's 40K Space Marine came out. So yeah, no, Space Marine 2. Definitely, this is gonna sound weird to say. This is definitely the better of the two games. Because I actually played the original game for you guys back in 2021. I did like it. And hell, I even replayed it a couple years ago with Goldie. And I mean, even though like he's still not super hooked to it, it actually kind of got him into 40K. At least a little, like bare minimum, but like yeah. But as far as the sequel here is concerned, I mean, the fact that it is a co-op campaign, that's pretty awesome. The Tyranids, the way that they handled them, I think was actually pretty cool in this game, especially with the like the horde AI that they have. I forgot exactly what it's called, but it's basically where they're able to put out as many enemy opponents in like a single field at a given time. It's pretty sick. Kind of gives me, in a weird way, Serious Sam vibes. I don't know why that comes to mind, but just the fact that there's like hundreds of guys, like hundreds of enemies that you're fighting at once. I don't know. This is pretty cool. And the fact that it's actually like it's a decently length game too. Like, I don't know. It's just kind of cool to see that this game was able to, you know, have just enough of a length for it to justify its price point. And of course, it has a multiplayer, which is decent fun. So yeah, no, Space Marine 2, I'd say, yeah. And well, speaking of long-awaited sequels, Stalker 2 finally dropped. Oh my god. So I'm someone who who's known about the Stalker games for a long time, and I am so happy we finally got Stalker 2 after 15 years. It was worth the wait. Like, this game is so, like, it's so good. Like, if you guys haven't already, go play Stalker 2. It's so much fun. Like, oh my god. So, words cannot describe how good this game is. Like, if you want your perfect sort of, you know, post-apocalyptic first person shooting, resource managing, kind of survival horror, not really, but kind of sort of game, Stalker 2 got you covered. So, but yeah, that's the thing though. Those are the only 4 games that kind of qualify here. And that sucks, because, I mean, you guys know I like shooter games. It's kind of what I played for the longest time. And it just kind of sucks that there's not really much that came out this year. Now, that being said, though, there's one game that you guys are probably wondering, why the hell do I not even have it on here? And that game is Black Ops 6. A game that I played for you guys back whenever it first came out. Actually, funny enough. Played through the entire campaign for you guys. And it's a good campaign. Not the best, I would say, as far, like, it's definitely, it's both better and worse than Cold Wars. It's complicated. It has some ideas that are better, has some ideas that are way worse. However, I could not nominate that game. Because, well, it broke our new rule. You remember why I said that we cannot accept games that have AI art in them? The game was confirmed to have AI art in it. Goldie and Sai can attest to you that the moment I learned this, I had a meltdown. I fucking, like, this actually kind of broke me as someone who was a long time Black Ops, like Call of Duty Black Ops defender. Because, you know me. Black Ops 1 and Black Ops 2 are both games that I do respect. You know, they're like the few, them and World at War, like the few Call of Duty games that I will genuinely say are like really good games that if they didn't have the Call of Duty name tied to them, they would still stand on their own. And I'm a huge fan of the Zombies game mode, even in Black Ops 3. Black Ops 3 was amazing. Hell, even Cold War had a pretty decent Zombies mode. Granted, not as good as the older games, but still decent fun enough. But learning that there was AI art used for the fucking Gobblegums, as well as calling cards in the multiplayer, I cannot in good faith nominate this game anymore. And unfortunately, truth be told, pretty much going forward, not only am I not going to be, like, not only am I never going to be nominating a Call of Duty game ever again for the Caspian Game Awards, out of principle, because I don't fucking know if they're going to be putting in AI art for the next game this year, or for the game, for, like, the game for 2026, or 2027, or 2028, or 2029, or whenever, because they opened the floodgates for this shit now, because they weren't the first game to use AI art in their fucking game. As far as I'm concerned, High on Life was the first game to do that bullshit. But unfortunately, Call of Duty is now dead to me. At least it's like any game from, like, you know, this current generation. So, and that sucks. So yeah, unfortunately, Black Ops 6, that's the last Call of Duty game that I will ever be touching for you guys. And I'm not gonna fucking buy, like, a single new Call of Duty game. I mean, not that I have done that anyways, because I actually played that game. I actually played Black Ops 6 through Game Pass. Thank God, by the way. But yeah, no. I feel very insulted that they would do that. So yeah, no, that's why Black Ops 6 is not going to get nominated, because they had AR in their game. And unfortunately, they're setting a precedent for that shit. So yeah, no. I swear to God, Battlefield better not fucking use AI in their fucking game either. Because, we're already spreading thin as far as shooter games are concerned. I don't want another franchise to fall victim to that because, well, that was cringe learning that Black Ops 6 had that shit. But thankfully, we don't have to have that be a nomination or even an honorable mention. So, what's the real winner of the shooter category? Well, let's go over that. So, the award for the best shooter game of 2024 goes to Stalker 2. Okay. Worth the wait. Absolutely worth the wait. I will say this though. This game did have some glitches in it. Here and there. But thankfully it wasn't like anything game breaking, at least from the whenever I was playing it with my cousins. I will admit though, it was just teetering the line, at least with the broken launches, because although there's a reason why this game was broken. I'll get to that in a second. But anyways, first of all, shoot, I forgot to add that point. But anyways, so I mean, first of all, as far as as far as this game is concerned, this is a beautiful looking game. Like, oh my god, this game is absolutely beautiful in certain sections, especially in the poppy fields. Oh my god, that is some. It honestly, I'm not gonna lie, some of it actually kind of looked like real life. I don't know, maybe that statement will be dated in like 10 years or something like that, but like, oh my god, we're now finally getting to a point where video games are really starting to look like real life. I mean, you can probably tell by like some of the character models that it's still a game, but man, like this game is so beautiful to look at. Which is weird because this is a post-apocalyptic game, but even just besides that, it's just graphical fidelity alone is fantastic with this game. And even just besides that, this offers pretty much the same experience that the previous Stalker games offered. It offers the same amount of immersive survival content that is put within the game. You know, with the resource management and the different amount of weapons. I mean, this game does have weapon jams and has animations that, granted, are a lot more tame compared to Far Cry 2's weapon jam system, but they're still in the game. And, you know, I think that's for the better. You know, make sure you maintain your weapons is the point that this game's trying to drive. And also, just the fact that this game has the freeform style of gameplay that the older games were known for. Because Stalker, as a series, like, they had multiple endings in their games, and you can side with different factions. And that's something that I wish a lot more games did. And thankfully, Stalker 2 definitely delivers in that regard. And, well, you see my point that I see down there. This was made during an actual real-life war. That's unfortunately why there's a lot of glitches, is because, well, developers are Ukrainian, and, well, the Russo-Ukraine war has been pretty rough on this studio, especially, because a lot of their developers, they got drafted, and as far as we're concerned, a few of them probably even died in that conflict. So, the fact that they even got this released is a miracle in its, like, in and of itself. And, well, like I said, this game, despite some of the, you know, nitpicks you can have with this game, it was absolutely worth the wait for this game. Go buy Stalker 2. If there's any game, like, if you're not, like, a multiplayer person, so if you don't really care for, like, Helldivers, buy Stalker 2. It's absolutely worth it for you guys. Like, it's so much fun. So yeah. All right, sim strategy. Another category that was in the Game Awards proper. So weirdly enough, considering just how many games we nominated for 2023, it really did kind of make me realize that we're kind of living not only in like a platformer resurgence era, but also a sim strategy resurgence era. There were like a ton of strategy games that were being like simulation and strategy games that were released this year that kicked a lot of ass. Like, it actually was pretty insane thinking about just how much simulation and strategy games have started to finally like come back, especially considering that, you know, they're kind of more of a niche thing. So yeah, like, I don't know, it's just really cool to see that, like, you know, a category like this to come back in prominence. So I guess the real question is, did the Game Awards at least respect that? In some ways. I mean, they did nominate Path of the Gods as a STEM strategy game. But like I said, it's kind of a hybrid between like an action adventure and a strategy game. So I nominated for action adventure, but it's fair that they nominated it here. But as far as the other games are concerned, first of all, we got Manor Lords, which is probably a game that I would nominate personally. I think it's a cool sort of medieval life. Is it management sim or is it like a strategy game? I don't remember. But I like the setting. Okay, yeah, it's a medieval. No, it is a city build. Okay, it's like a city builder sort of thing, like an RTS city builder. I guess kind of like the Stronghold games. So that's kind of cool. Problem is that it's in early access. So because of that, I don't want to nominate it because, you know, that's not a full release. But from what I can tell, it's pretty cool. Definitely worth checking out if you're into that. And then we got ourselves Unicorn Overlord. I'm not gonna lie, this one, I guess this one just didn't really vibe with me as much. It's kind of, I guess, like, I don't want to say it's like Fire Emblem, because it has different mechanics compared to that. I guess that's like the closest thing you can call this, is like kind of a Fire Emblem thing. But I don't know. I guess this just didn't really like resonate with me as much, though. A decent game that if that piques your interest, if it's like if you're like a big Fire Emblem person, you might check it out. And then we got Frostpunk 2. So 2018, Frostpunk came out. One of the best city builders ever released. We gave it a lot of praise in our Caspian Game Awards for 2018. And for them to finally release a sequel to that game was awesome, to say the least. A very different approach, but a much refreshing one, because the first game was like a mix between a city builder and a survival game. Whereas Frostpunk 2, it leans away from the survival thing, and it plays more like a traditional strategy game. And that sort of mix between city builder and strategy, I think, is actually pretty cool. I mean, like, Manor Lords actually, ironically enough, kind of does something similar. Just with, in Frostpunk's case, it's more of a steampunk thing, or it's dieselpunk, steampunk. Sue me. And yeah, no, I think it's a pretty cool sort of unique approach, yet continuation of a pretty damn good game. So yeah, Frostpunk 2, highly recommend. And then last but not least, of course, we got ourselves Age of Mythology Retold. Because this is I guess it's a remake. It wouldn't count for this, but make no mistake, is still, I would argue, to be a pretty good version of Age of Mythology. Yeah, Age of Mythology, like I did stream it that one time, and it was kind of whatever for me. I still at least can see the appeal, and it is just kind of cool to see that Age of Mythology was able to get a bit of a kick of breath of fresh air, especially since all the Age of Empire games got a lot of they got a bunch of recent updates in the past like 10 years. So to see Age of Mythology finally get the same treatment is pretty cool. Yeah, Frostpunk 2 was the winner. That gave me a big smile when I saw that. Like I was happy that they gave it the win. Objectively, in my opinion, the best choice here. But what other games were there as far as sim strategy games that we could theoretically nominate? Enter Moonbreaker for our first choice. So you guys know I used to do a lot of Warhammer stuff. I guess I still do. I just haven't painted in a while. And, I like my tabletop games. Well, yeah, Warhammer obviously being the case. Well, Moonbreaker is basically a tabletop simulation. It's basically a tabletop inspired strategy game where you use a bunch of miniatures and compete against other players or the AI in different objectives. And I thought this game was actually pretty cool. Weirdly enough, I actually discovered this through the YouTuber Bricky, where he was talking about games. Like, I forgot the video, what it was called. It wasn't his Moonbreaker video, but it was something else. And this piqued my interest, especially since you can actually customize the actual characters, to the minute detail, which is insane for any game. And I mean, a lot of the and it's also pretty cool that this game even exists, because a lot of the voice acting that was in this game, they actually come from games like Overwatch, League of Legends, Valorant. Like, a lot of those voice actors, they actually provide a lot of the voices here as well, which is pretty cool to see. But here's the most interesting thing about this game. It was made by the same people. It's made by the same people who made Subnautica.
What?
Yeah! The Subnautica people made Moonbreaker. It's just as baffling as it sounds, but it's still cool. So it plays nothing like it. So if you're a Subnautica fan, don't play this unless if you're already into just straight up strategy games. But yeah, no, Moonbreaker, pretty cool. Pretty cool game that I highly recommend you guys check out. Unfortunately, it did get some negative reception as of late for some weird reason, but I could not resist talking about this game for you guys, so go check it out. And then we got ourselves Song of Conquest. This is a kind of a spiritual successor to the Heroes of Might and Magic games, or at least that's kind of or I guess just Might and Magic in general. Well, I don't know. It's kind of its own thing. It's kind of also like a tabletop thing. Kinda. But I don't know, I just think it's pretty cool. Yeah, okay, yeah. It is like similar to Moonbreaker in that it is kind of like a digital like board tabletop game, which I think is actually pretty cool. Also taking some light cues from the Heroes of Might and Magic games, just on a much larger scale. So if that's something that kind of interests you, you can go check it out. And then we got ourselves SteamWorld Heist 2. We've talked about SteamWorld a couple of times before. I just remember seeing the PC gaming. I think it was the PC gaming announcement stream last year, where this game really piqued my interest because it's basically like a 2D XCOM style games, or it's a 2D XCOM style game, which if you guys know, I fucking love that style of game. I mean, I got introduced to it through Pyre one of all things, and I don't know, just that sort of turn-based style of strategy. I know people call it turn-based tactics. It's more of a subcategory of turn-based strategy games, but like I guess you can call it that. I think it's pretty cool. So if you want more like something that is a bit more of a cartoony approach in that genre, SteamWorld Heist, not too bad of a game, if I'm honest. Which, well, kind of speaking of something very similar, we've got the Sumerian 6. This one is also a more of a tactics-based strategy game. Though it's more of a stealth. It takes it more on like the stealth approach. So I think the best comparison would be something like Invisible Ink that we talked about in our 2015 Caspian Game Awards. So if you like kind of a more stealth-based strategy thing, this one is a decent enough adventure, and it's got some narrative bits here and there, so you can go check it out. And then last but not least, Sins of a Solar Empire 2. Got a lot of anticipated sequels coming out, at least for me, because RTS series, basically like the spiritual successor to the Homeworld games, which that makes me cry because I forgot there was also Homeworld 3 that came out this year and it sucked. Go play this. If you want more of a space-based RTS, go play Sins of a Solar Empire 2. It is much worth your time. That's all I'm going to say about it. So, I'm not going to pretend it's like, the best thing of all time, because it's not. Go check it out, though. Alright, so. Yeah, I'm going to try to make sure I am a bit more quick, because I got some stuff to do tonight. But anyways, so. The award for the best sim strategy game of 2024 goes to Frostpunk 2. It should not surprise you. We got some pretty good sim. Although, to be fair, this was a really good year for the sim strategy category. I'm not going to deny that. But it's Frostpunk 2. It's Frostpunk 2. Go check it out. If you guys haven't already. I mean, yes, it's different from the first game. But that doesn't matter, because it's still a very damn good game in its own right. It still has a lot of city building to it. But everything is a lot more... well, I guess the first game was still kind of gridded. But this one is a lot more freeform. But it also has a lot of challenge to it, because, well, yet it has some of that survival elements in it. It's a lot more of just a grander strategy thing. It's not a grand strategy game, but it has a lot more to do with interacting with other nearby settlements and just kind of competing with resources and all that fun stuff. And I think that approach is actually kind of cool, especially since in the first game you're just more focused on trying to, like, you know, maintain your own foothold, and so making sure you you know, have to deal with competing with outside forces. I think it's pretty cool. And also the branching paths in this game are definitely influence your city a lot more than they did in the first game. Because in the first game, it had branching paths, but they didn't really like do anything until you went into like the DLCs. But they made sure to make up for that in here, where they actually have a lot more of a purpose, and you can go down multiple different grim paths. Like, again, this is a grim dark game series that we got here. Yes, I do consider Frostpunk to be grimdark. And so, like, you can probably imagine the depravity that like the depraved paths you're gonna have to take in order for you to maintain your cities, or your city. It gets pretty dark. I mean, there's an 11-bit Studios game here, so that should be, you know, par of the course here. But regardless, go check out Frostpunk 2. You will not regret it. Alright. Multiplayer games! So, as tradition, the Game Awards do tend to choose pretty bad games to represent best multiplayer. We've talked about this with most of every single year. There was only like, what, 1 or maybe 2 years where they got it right. But every other time, it has just been the absolute wrong choices as far as nominations. Did they at least finally get it right this time? It's complicated. Okay, so Helldivers 2, of course. That goes without saying. Same thing with Space Marine 2. Although, people were confused by that. And even I have to admit, it's not the best multiplayer. It's pretty standard. You know, it's pretty bare bones, all things considered. But it's still decent. Unfortunately, like pretty much what I said about the AI art thing, that disqualifies Black Ops 6. So, well, unfortunately, that would not be a category here. But then we got the other games. Tekken 8, for example. Tekken 8, okay, I mentioned this before. I'm not a big fighting guy fan, or at least like fighting games like this or Street Fighter. I don't know. I guess I'm just not really like a fist to fist type person personally. And so Tekken 8 just didn't really grab me as much as it did a bunch of other people. I don't know, it's just not really my style per se. So, a respectable game though that I do respect. Don't get it twisted. Like, for the people who are very happy with Tekken 8, that's fair, especially since I've heard much better things about this compared to 6 and 7. So, that's at least worth something. And then we got Super Mario Party Jamboree. And this is another thing that's just not really my thing. I'm just not a big party game guy. I've never really cared for Super Mario Party or just really any other game that's kind of like it. I don't know. It's too low stakes for me, if that makes sense. I know that sounds weird to say, but it's just not really. I don't know. Like, this is not my thing. That being said, Helldivers was the winner of this category, which is good. I probably would say like that's like the objectively best choice here. So yeah, but we can always choose better nominations here. So Helldivers 2 and Space Marine 2, they're staying. 0 Hour is going to be here as well. But we got some games that basically were in early access in previous years, but they had full releases in 2024. Take for instance Sons of the Forest. This game was originally it was in early access in 2023 and it finally released in 2024. I really like the first Forest. It had some problems, like it had some weird jank issues. You can definitely tell it was pretty rough around the edges. But a lot of that changed with Sons of the Forest. As far as like a survival, I guess technically it's a survival horror game. Like as far as like, that's concerned. Yeah, no, this is a much better improvement. There's a lot new recipes for different items in this game. There's new enemies just in general. There's a lot more. Are they updating this game? But whatever. Even if they aren't updating this game, like with new content, this is still a pretty refined game. In its current state, and it offers a lot of fun. So, Sons of the Forest, it's a good thumbs up for me. And well, speaking of survival horror, we got Outlast Trials. Yeah, a sort of, I guess, Dead by Daylight kinda game, except, well, unlike Dead by Daylight, you can actually play this game in co-op and not just entirely in, player versus player, which is something that I think is actually appreciated. So yeah. I think what really makes Outlast Trials, at least interesting to me, is that it's also very challenge-based, which is something that is interesting for something that is a multiplayer-based survival horror game. Like, you wouldn't really think they would try to do something like that, but it offers a lot of, variety in an already kind of interesting niche of horror games. So yeah, no, Outlast Trials, I'm going to give it a nod. Go check it out. And then we've got ourselves Satisfactory, a game that was in early access all the way back in 2019, but it finally got its official release in 2024. And I guess I'm just kind of stretching this one in particular out because it's more of a, I don't want to call it a Minecraft-like, because it's really not. It's more of a base building-based experience. And I don't know, I just think that's kind of cool. And considering that, just like something like a Minecraft that you can play with other people and just, build up your resources and stuff. It's harmless enough. So we're going to nominate it here. Oh, excuse me. But it should be pretty obvious what the winner is. I'm not even going to waste your time. Best multiplayer game, Helldivers 2. You didn't even need to watch this stream to know this was going to win best multiplayer. Of course. Obviously, of course. This is going to be the winner. And I mean, again, the streams themselves that I've done, they pretty much showcase why. Excellent movement and shooting combat. It has pretty fun co-op, though the friendly fire can be fucking stupid at points. Like, it's like, I don't know, I still am not entirely a fan of that system. It can be really fucking annoying, especially if you're in a lobby with a bunch of trolls who just, shoot you immediately when you, like, go down. That shit fucking is annoying. I think the best compromise they should have done for that is for anything that's higher than like easy, have it to where friendly fire's on, but then have easy and like trivial, have that be no friendly fire. I think that would have been the best compromise, but well, they're not going to change it because, well, they're whatever. But even if that's kind of a negative, what's a massive positive is the randomly generated maps that are offered on every single planet in the game with a variety of different biomes. It takes the Deep Rock Galactic approach in that respect, and I think that's pretty awesome, making this game basically infinitely replayable. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of the same objectives here and there, but the fact that there are a ton of different variety of objectives and also different variety of enemies to fight, it makes it to where the repetition is not nearly as annoying. And, well, everything, you can unlock pretty much anything in the game at a very reasonable time. Like, it doesn't really, like, yeah, there's microtransactions, but it's one of the few examples where it's not really that much of a hindrance. So yeah, no. Helldivers 2? Go check it out. And of course, as a bit of a bonus, and we haven't done this in a while, this game on PC has mod support! Oh my god! Mod support for this game! Unfortunately, not any like new weapons or factions or anything, just reskins of different weapons and armors and factions as of right now. That's because it's a live service game, it would be like impossible to add like new content. It takes the Left 4 Dead approach where it's more so reskins of stuff, but it's still pretty cool just being able to play as like ODST guys. Shooting a bunch of Covenant or Separatists. So I haven't streamed that for you guys yet, but oh my god, that'd be so much fun whenever I do. So yeah, no. Obvious winner. Well, speaking of potentially obvious winners, we ourselves the DLC/expansion category, which we've not done in a while. Not since our 1995 Caspian Game Awards. It's insane. Though, this is a pretty low number that we got here, but I think these are decent enough choices. I did not put these in chronological release order, by the way. I did not have enough time to get that organized, unfortunately. So you're just gonna have to deal with the fact that this is how I organize it. So obviously, Shadow of the Erdtree. This is the category it should be in. Learn Game Awards. Have this actually be a category. Especially considering that, like, well, you might use the argument, like, well, Erdtree, that's like the only big DLC that came out. Not really. Because we got some other choices here. Take, for instance, Final Fantasy XVI's The Rising Tide, which added in a completely new area into the game, as well as some new bosses and new armor and like stuff like that. And you guys know how much I actually really do appreciate Final Fantasy XVI. It, I think, was kind of a bit of a return. It was a return to like a traditional fantasy aesthetic, which is something that I've missed so dearly with Final Fantasy. Not since Final Fantasy IX did we have like a true fantasy Final Fantasy game. You can argue 12, but or maybe, I guess 11? Yeah, I guess technically 11, but that's like an MMO. It's part of the problem with that one. But yeah, like, 16, I would definitely argue is pretty cool as far as a DLC. But then we also got the Alan Wake 2 DLCs. Though I ended up choosing the Lake House that came out last year. There was that one that like was like a Twilight Zone kind of thing, but I ended up choosing this one because this was the one that was the most highly received. Um, and I mean, Alan Wake 2. I mean, spoilers for if you haven't seen our 2022 or 2023 Caspian Game Awards, but Elden Ring and Alan Wake 2, those are our game of the years for both of those years. And so having the other major Caspian Game Award winner of recent memory have continuing its story, just kind of tying in some of the stuff that was in Control, more so with Alan Wake too. I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, go check that out. And then we've got ourselves Warhammer 3's Throne of Decay DLCs. This one's technically 3 separate DLC packs in one. But it's basically it's the same. They're kind of like they've released at the same time. It's basically like it's a group of legendary lords for Total War Warhammer 3's campaign. Obviously the one that everyone was the most excited about was with Tamarkan. Who's like a lord of Nurgle. Which I mean that's like the least interesting thing because how much I fucking hate Nurgle. But it also introduced a Empire of Man Lord as well as a Dwarven Lord, and they can be used in both of the Immortal Empires and the Realm of Chaos campaigns, which is pretty cool. So yeah, just offering some cool new just items for Warhammer 3, which is already a pretty big game in itself. So having some more content is always welcome. But let's not kid ourselves. Erdtree. I would have been shot if I didn't have this as the winner. It's too obvious. A million people have already said why this is the winner, or why this should be the winner. I'm not gonna repeat myself or repeat whatever they say. Basically, just new items and weapons, new biomes to explore. Actually fleshing out the story a bit because most From Software games are just terrible at conveying their narratives. This one actually started to kind of make sense a bit more. Not that Elden Ring didn't attempt that. It did have some of that, but it was still kind of vague in some areas. And well, if you thought that Elden Ring was easier in comparison to every other From Software game, this reaffirms that they still have the guts to make a challenging as hell game. I'd say that this is probably as hard as Dark Souls 1 as far as its difficulty. So, need I say more? Alright, remake, remaster. This is the category where, well, some of the games we already talked about will be featured in because, again, they are... it's just weird to me to nominate games that are like either remakes or remasters of games that existed years prior, even decades prior. It just feels disingenuous because it's not completely a new idea. It's just refreshing up an idea. So that's why we have this category. And well, it should not surprise you that Final Fantasy Rebirth, Age of Mythology Retold, and Silent Hill 2. That's the category that this is featured in. And, I mean, they're good remakes. So, I would definitely recommend you guys check them out. But those weren't the only good remakes that came out in 2024. Take, for instance, Star Wars Dark Forces Remaster, which I get it's more of a remaster, to be fair. Actually, the rest of these are remasters. I mean, Dark Forces... I played it for you guys years ago. We also talked about it a lot in our 1995 Caspian Game Awards. I think that is a pretty damn good, basically it's Star Wars' version of Doom. But it was also pretty innovative as it was one of the first FPS games to actually have a cohesive narrative. And I don't know, it's just kind of fun shooting a bunch of Empire guys. So, hell yeah. Also, Clock Tower Rewind. Another game from 1995 that we talked about quite a bit, and I think holds up a lot better than you would think. And well, with this version, our friends at WayForward, they were the ones who pretty much worked on this remaster. And yeah, no, it's pretty damn good. I think they use some like new stills for like the dialogue. But that's fine. So yeah, if you want if you want an easy and a more accessible way to be able to play Clock, like the original version of Clock Tower, not the PS1 game, the Super Nintendo game, this version's got you covered. And then we've got ourselves the Soul Reaver games that were remastered. So yeah, Soul Reaver 1 and 2 were remastered from the Legacy of Kain series. So it's good to see an old IP that has been kind of dormant for decades get a bit of a, fresh lift up. So yeah. I feel like you guys know what's gonna win, so I'm just gonna do it. So here we go. The award for the best remake / remaster of 2024 goes to Silent Hill 2. This genuinely shocked me with how faithful this was. I did not think that this would be as good of a remake as it was. And that's coming from someone who loved the original version. I was in tears at the end of the original Silent Hill 2. Absolute tears. And from what I can tell with this game, yeah, no, they actually knocked it out of the park. This definitely plays more in line with the Resident Evil remakes. So it doesn't have the controls that the original game did. Not that I complained about the controls of the original version of the game. It's actually Silent Hill, I feel like, is actually one of the few series that actually did those style of tank controls right. But they went in the Resident Evil remake approach, where it was just more over the shoulder for both the shooting and for the melee combat. And I think that's probably the best compromise that they could have done for this. And that's the thing. This game, even though like I've already experienced the game, this game is still fucking scary at points. Like, goddamn. Now, I will say, it was odd that they decided to change some of the dialogue. Like, for example, like, slight spoilers for Silent Hill 2. I recommend you guys actually play that. But they did change some of Eddie's dialogue a bit, especially whenever they're in the prison. Because, I mean, they completely they ignore the dog. So, which I guess fair, that might be insensitive, but it's like, it's kind of a big fucking part of it's kind of part of Eddie's character, at least a little bit. But I digress. Small nitpicks aside, this is an absolute bliss of a remake, and this was made by Bloober. Again, these guys made that lame as hell Blair Witch game, and that mediocre as hell, well, the mediocre, didn't mean to be literary there, but like, the game was mid as hell. And well, their Layers of Fear project is kind of, I don't know. It's not terrible, but it's clearly just trying to beat PT, which, I mean, ironic enough considering that they ended up making an official remake of Silent Hill 2. So, I gotta give them respect. So, this does make me more excited, ironically enough, not only for potential blooper projects in the future, because it actually shows cases that they can actually get shit right, but also, this makes me even more excited about Metal Gear Solid Delta. I know it's not by the same studio, but it does showcase that Konami properties, I think, are at least getting safer now, because Konami was in a very shitty spot for like the past decade. So let's just hope that this general trend keeps going up. All right, so now we've reached the end game categories. So of course, art direction, the most subjective part of this entire thing. And well, an award that was at the original Caspian, or not the original, official Game Awards. What did they end up choosing? So they chose Erdtree, which, fair enough. Astrobot, again, fair enough. Metaphor, yeah, and Neva. I think those games are fair as far as their thing is concerned. I mean, they all have pretty unique art styles. I mean, Elden Ring has that, dark fantasy look. Astrobot, of course, has that chibi robot look, which is pretty cute. Metaphor, I mean, Animu. And then Neva with that sort of cool little color palette, like that art, that watercolor painting looking art aesthetic that they've got, which is pretty cool. Unfortunately, now this is the point where I have to acknowledge Black Myth Wukong, because this is another awkward conversation that I have to have with you guys. Because, well, you noticed I did not nominate it for the best RPG of 2024, which I know this was nominated for best action game, and it even won that category. But first of all, it's not really an action game. I know I talked about it with Phantom, but it's not a action game solely. It's an RPG because it has a level up system. It's a Souls-like, it's a Soulsborne game. So, but this is unfortunately kind of an awkward conversation I have to have with you guys. Well, I mean, yes, I do give a lot of respect to Elden Ring, and I've even given respect to FromSoft multiple times, where I've given awards to Elden Ring, Bloodborne, and I'm pretty sure I even gave one to Sekiro. Yes, I did give one to Sekiro. But I think Black Myth Wukong is unfortunately pretty emblematic of a problem that I've had for a while. And it's the fact that I've been seeing that there's been a lot of Soulsborne games that have been popping off. Because, for context, a lot of the games that I see a lot of people praise on YouTube, they tend to basically be a lot of Soulsborne games. And I mean, if that's what you like, more power to you, but I don't want every game to be a Soulsborne game, people. Like, it has its place, but I feel like that's like the one genre that, like, people on, at least online, they always fucking sing its praises, and then, like, everything else people just shit on. It's so annoying. Like, it's gotten to the point where it actually I'm starting to kind of even regret some of the awards I've given out to some of the other Soulsborne games I've done. It's just a trend that I'm getting really sick and tired of. So that's just me, though. Well, there's that. There's also the weird takes that the devs have, which I'll get to that when we get to the Game of the Year thing, but it's just awkward to talk about Black Myth Wukong. Like, I know it was like a top tier game for a lot of people, but I don't know, man. I mean, either way, it did not win this. Metaphor actually was the one who won Best Art Direction, which, fair enough. But as far as what I ended up choosing, well, I chose Nine Souls and Bow for their cool look, like, you know, sort of, I guess, I don't want to call it anime, but like they're more animal-inspired Japanese painting art style, not too dissimilar to something that Okami did 2 decades prior. And then I gave Lorelei for its cool looking PS1 slash noir aesthetic. Metaphor, because, you know, it has a decent looking anime art style, and of course Neva for its watercolor palette. But one more game I'm going to nominate here is a game called Ultros, which is another sort of Metroidvania style of game where, you know, it has a really cool you know, neon look. I mean, you can just tell by the cover. It is a sprite-based game, so it's not gonna look like that particularly, but it does have a really cool, it does use a lot of cool use of like greens and like, you know, neon colors, and I think that looks really cool. So go check it out just for its aesthetics alone. But yeah, let's choose what I would personally have as best art direction. So the award for the best art direction of 2024 goes to Lorelei and the Laser Eyes. Fine. We talked about this game for years. It's finally getting an award. There. You guys happy? You guys happy about a game that we talked about for the past like 3 years? Finally get a recognition here. I don't know. I just like this aesthetic. It's, again, it's like weirdly enough, this game kind of has like it in a weird way. This game has like a really cool survival horror look to it, even though it's a puzzle game. Like, it's not a survival horror game at all. You don't, like, there's not really too much risk to it. But the fact that it has that sort of black and white retro noir look on top of it kind of looking like a PS1 game, I think it looks pretty cool. And I just like that look of, like, that sort of like contrast that they use with the reds and the purples that they occasionally use for important items. It makes for a very unique looking game, and I don't know, just pretty cool. It's very macabre-esque. So, oh, and also, warning: this game does also use the traditional tank controls of stuff like Resident Evil. So, and it does have fixed cameras, although in this instance, it's more like Silent Hill 2's fixed cameras from the original Silent Hill 2. So, it's not as annoying, thankfully. All right, best narrative. So, another category that was in our Oh So Dear Game Awards. They tend to be okay as far as choosing categories or games for this category. So, what do we got? I agree with Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth, and I do agree with Metaphor. I mean, those are both RPGs, so naturally they're going to have a lot of narrative depth. That just kind of comes with a lot of RPGs. But yeah, like, that's just kind of par for the course. Obviously, I wouldn't personally do Final Fantasy Rebirth or Silent Hill 2 because they're remakes. So they're mostly the same story intact. Maybe just some slight changes here and there, but like it's the same thing. There's that. And then there's the Senua Saga's Hellblade 2, which is an extremely controversial game. Unfortunately, yes, I'm going to be blunt. This is another game that unfortunately was called the W word by idiots online who've never even heard of the first game, even though the first game was nominated in the 2017 in the 2017 Game Awards, and I'm pretty sure we even nominated it in our Caspian Game Awards. So the idiots online. But that's not the reason why I'm iffy about this game. I'm iffy about it because it's just not a good sequel to that game. It's completely a different tone, and they went in a really weird direction. I don't know. It's confusing. That being said, we're not going to nominate it here. There's actually a bunch of other games I do think actually have much better told stories. But oddly enough, Metaphor also won this category, which did surprise me. Not that, like, I disrespect Metaphor, because I do respect it. It wasn't really my top choice. As a matter of fact, I'm not gonna lie, I'm not gonna nominate Metaphor for this category. Because, truth be told... Oh, no, I did! Okay, sorry. I did do it. Okay, I'm sorry. I lied to you guys. I kind of...
What a shame.
Shut up. Okay. Metaphor, Refantazio, and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth are staying here. I'm also going to have Lorelei be here as well. I keep giving her a lot of credit. It's just a cool game, okay? Sue me. But also, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, I think actually it had a lot of a better story than it actually had any right to be. You know, being set in between Raiders and Last Crusade, I think really it helps kind of bridge that weird gap that was in between both of those games or in the movies. So having a game set in between those and fleshing that time period out, I think helps. And it does help that this game is just overall pretty solid as far as this is gameplay. So the story helps complement it. Funny enough as well, Stalker 2 does have a lot of just in-depth, like, it has a bit more of a in-depth narrative than you would think, especially if you go with whatever direction you end up going with. It can lead down to a lot of different, like, branching paths, which is insane. Like, it almost has as many branching paths as, like, a Bethesda game. So, if that's something that interests you, yeah. And this will definitely come as a surprise to anyone who knows me. Yeah, I nominated Into the Pit in this one as well. Normally, I'm someone who isn't really a big fan of FNAF storytelling. I've always been someone who's just straight up said that FNAF is very story anemic. It's just, that's like one of the weakest parts that I've always had, is that it's a lot more just, it's more of just a telling of a series of events rather than it being an actual cohesive narrative. It also doesn't help that a lot of it is in background details. Well, Into the Pit actually puts that as a priority, and I think it's for the better because, well, you know, just kind of, I don't know, it's just, we need, FNAF games need to be more like this. I said the same thing with Ruin, where I praised that for being a lot more of a focused game, not only just compared to that game's base game, but even just the entire franchise as a whole. I think Into the Pit is another step in the right direction, even if, like I said, it's not a mainline game. It's at least worth something. So, but yeah, So here we go. The award for best narrative of 2024 goes to Indiana Jones and the Great Circle. Yeah. This game's gonna get really snubbed, I feel like, in this upcoming cycle of Game Awards. I swear, that's going to happen. But yeah, no, I ended up choosing this for best narrative. I think this game pretty much captured the spirit of Indiana Jones in a very, more specifically, Raiders and Last Crusade. Because, I mean, those are the movies that most people prefer anyways. I know there's some people who also stand for Temple of Doom, but that movie's aged very poorly, but I'm not gonna be here nor there about that. But point is, Great Circle has a pretty great story, wouldn't you say? Like, I know that was a terrible pun, but okay, it's not like great. It's a pretty decent story. Obviously, you know, like I said, bridging the gap in between Raiders and Last Crusade. But even then, it's just a fun time. You just, like, you know, obviously you're going after the Nazis here. There's also some Italians that you end up fighting here or there. But even just some of the new characters that are introduced, I think they actually have some pretty cool one-liners here and there. And even a lot more of just a general sense of a threat this time around. And yeah, no, just being able to, you know, I don't know. There's just a lot of like cool character moments that are in between that add a lot of depth to these new characters. And just the visual storytelling of just going through all of the different locations that you do across the globe is pretty awesome. So yeah, no, in a weird way, yeah, Machine Games, they've got themselves another hit here. So yeah, no, go check this game out, because the Game Awards for 2025 are going to ignore this one. And that brings us to the Game of the Year. This was an extremely controversial year for the Game of the Year. Because, well, truth be told, half of the picks that they had here, not a lot of people liked, including myself. I was extremely critical whenever I first saw this list. Because, well, I don't think these were good choices. Or a lot of these weren't good choices. So, and it just felt like no matter what was going to happen, people were going to be pissed. Well, because, well, unfortunately, we kind of saw that with this year's Game Awards, much to my dismay. Just, like, but whatever, let's get to it. So, Game of the Year. So, yeah, you see the problems already here. So, first of all, I'd say, if I'm going to be honest, the only games that really do deserve to be on here is Astrobot and Metaphor v Fantasio. That's it. The other games do not. I mean, again, I've already mentioned this, Final Fantasy Rebirth, that is a remake. That is not a fully fledged new game, therefore, it just feels awkward and weird for it to be nominated here. Like, why? Like, stop nominating remakes in the Game of the Year category. That's actually going to drive me insane. But then there's Elden Ring, Shadow of the Erdtree. As I've already mentioned, it is not a new game. It is a DLC, and they did the same shit back in 2016 with The Witcher 3 Blood and Wine. I don't know why the Game Awards always, like, they do this every so often, and it's so goddamn annoying. Like, stop nominating DLCs for Game of the Year. It's Like, it's disingenuous, and you're ignoring other games that could be in this slot. It's just like, I don't get it. So there's those games, and then there's fucking Balatro, and then Black Myth Wukong. So, again, I've already mentioned this. I genuinely don't get the appeal for Balatro. I really don't. I've seen gameplay. It just, I'm gonna say it, Inscription's better. Inscription is the objectively better, roguelike card game. I don't get it. And I don't think I ever will. And then Black Myth Wukong. So I already mentioned that, this was kind of an awkward game because it kind of represents why I'm not a really big fan of a lot of games that get a lot of praise online. Because, well, this is another Souls-like game that has been getting a lot of praise. But then there's another issue, which I forgot to actually bring up articles about this. But, well, let's just say that the developers of this game, they're fucking assholes. I mean, I remember hearing about, them talking about some pretty sexist and homophobic stuff. And that, well, I mean, especially considering what's going on in the real world right now, that's like kind of a pretty cringy thing to say. I'm not gonna lie. Don't be a homophobe and don't be like, an incel. And then there was the reaction to the winner. Because Black Myth Wukong did not win the Game of the Year. That was Astrobot. Now, the moment that they were announced, like they announced this as the Game of the Year winner, I was so fucking relieved because after this game, like this Game Award show being absolute torture for me, this was just like the one win that I wanted. Because, like, this was the one game that, like, I was so glad that won. They got it right. They got this one right. But, man, the Black Myth Wukong guys, they were fucking pissed. They went off on Twitter. Like, it was insane. And also pretty fucking sad. They were bitching and complaining. They were like, we worked on this speech for 6 months. Like, and the fact that we lost to a fucking babies game. It's like, shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. You already won Best Action Game. And you won Best Community, choice. Like, shut the fuck up. Like, come on, man. Like, it's shit like that to where, and here's the thing. Here's the thing. I wasn't, entirely off board with Black Myth Wukong. Because I know, here's the thing. Some of my friends, they fucking love the game. But I don't want to support pieces of shit like that. Like, come on, man. Like, grow the fuck up. You already fucking won. Multiple awards. Be fucking happy. So, yeah, no, that unfortunately kind of fucking tainted my opinion on Black Myth Wukong. And, well, yeah, unfortunately, pretty dog shit choices we've got here. I'm just gonna be blunt. Because 2024 was not even that bad of a year. But they chose a DLC. They chose a remake. They chose a fucking Souls game made by a bunch of fucking assholes. And they chose a fucking card game as Game of the Year. Let's improve this list. So, my Game of the Year nominations include Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth, Helldivers 2, Astrobot, Frostpunk 2, and Metaphor ReFantasio. It should not surprise you as to why I chose all these. And, well, I don't even think I need to really explain why. I mean, Prince of Persia, fantastic return to form of a franchise that was pretty awesome. Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth for being, honestly, a good continuation of its own respective series and adding a lot of, narrative, flavor and going to different locations. Helldivers 2 for being an absolute, titan earlier last year and for providing a pretty good multiplayer experience. Astrobot also being another sort of hopefully potential wake-up call for its own respective company. Frostpunk 2 for being an absolutely fantastic, city building strategy game. And I'm even gonna keep Metaphor ReFantasio on here, even though it's not like my number one choice that I would have for a game of the year. I respect it enough to keep it here. So, and my friend Simori fucking loves the game, and a bunch of my other friends do. So I respect it enough to keep it here. But if you guys have noticed, you guys can probably guess what the winner is going to be. So here we go. The last Caspian Game Awards that I will be doing for a long time. So, here we go. The Game of the Year award, or the Game of the Year of 2024 goes to Astrobot. Everyone wins! 2024 is the first year of the 2020s where everyone wins! Hell yeah! And yeah, no, Astrobot is no exception. But why this is kind of a weird choice, for me at least, because, well, truth be told, Astrobot, it's a lot more simple compared to literally every other game we talked about. But I think that is why this game ended up winning Game of the Year. It's because it was honestly something that a lot of people have been yearning for a long time. It's like a traditional. I want to say traditional. It was. It definitely. It was basically a collectathon style of platformer that we have not seen in literally like 15 years. This type of game was dead for the longest time, and people tend to forget that. Well, I mean, last year was kind of the year where platformers finally had a resurgence, obviously, and so. This game was basically just something that a lot of people wanted to have. As much as I'm someone who loves, their action games, games that are a bit more serious in tone, a lot more dark, a lot more edgy, or a lot more, well, I already said serious, but they just, more mature in their tone. Sometimes you just want to have a game where it's just literally like, a child can play it. You want something that like doesn't take itself seriously like at all, and it's just fun. And considering that we went through a goddamn pandemic a few years ago, and well, considering that we're living under a fascist roof right now, just give us something like this. And this was able to go beyond just being, it went beyond being just a simple tech demo, which was what the original game was. Astro's Playroom, obviously, this being the sequel to that. I mean, it helps that this game does have a pretty cool, art style, and it's just a general love letter to a bunch of other Sony IPs. Obviously, my boy, he's a collectible in the game, even though it's technically not him, but whatever. But like, you know, other franchises, you know, like Ratchet and Clank, Jak and Daxter, Spyro, Crash, Bloodborne, Ape Escape, Killzone. I mean, there's some Helldivers collectibles that they added in a new, like, recent update. Medieval, like, so many. Like, basically, this was just a love letter to the past 30 years of Sony's history. Specifically with the PlayStation, because it got a lot of people into gaming. I mean, it was like the PlayStation 2. That was the first console I ever grew up with. And I guess just being more of like a respectable love letter to that is something that I can, you know, commend. And well, truth be told, this should be a wake-up call for Sony. Just as much as Prince of Persia Lost Crown should be a wake-up call for Ubisoft, this needs to be especially be a wake-up for them. Because if anything is to say about Concord's massive, massive failure and this game's massive, massive success, is that Sony needs to look back at what made them popular to begin with their consoles. Either new refreshing like IPs that have lasting like, you know, standing power, and can appeal to, you know, the target audiences that they're trying to go for, or bringing back IPs that they've been ignoring for decades, but then, you know, and stop milking the IPs that they've been doing for the like past 10 years. That's the lesson that Sony needs to learn, is that not every game needs to be The Last of Us. Not every game needs to be Horizon. Not every game needs to be fucking Spider-Man. And not every game needs to be a shitty live service. I mean, Helldivers worked with them in that respect. And fair enough. But that was kind of the only live service that's worked with them so far. That's my point. So they need to have this as like the game to really bounce them back into being a lot more respected, because they've been doing a lot of really dumb decisions recently beyond the actual games themselves. And well, considering the position that Microsoft is in, they need to take advantage of that right now, because Microsoft right now is in a pretty shitty situation themselves. So, but yeah, that was the game of the year. So to recap the awards of tonight. So indie game went to 0 Hour. Action adventure went to Legend of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom. Best platformer went to Prince of Persia: Lost Crown. Best RPG went to Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth. Best oh my god, I forgot to do Erdtree. Fuck. Yeah, I guess that's fine. I can just type in this now. Yeah, I used our original tier list as a template for this, which is pretty cute. I'm not gonna lie. I know. I guess it all just came around in the very end. But anyways, yeah, indie game went to 0 Hour, action adventure, Prince of Persia, Legends of Zelda: Echoes of Wisdom, platformer, Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, RPG, Like a Dragon: Infinite Wealth, shooter game, Stalker 2. Sim Strategy, Frostpunk 2, multiplayer, Helldivers 2, DLC, Elden Ring, Shadow Erdtree, remake, Silent Hill 2, Best Art Direction, Lorelei, Best Narrative, Indiana Jones, Orchid Circle, and I forgot to get a fucking thing for that. God damn it. And of course, the game of the year. The last one that we'll be doing for a while is Astrobot. And as for my top 10 favorite games of this year, I did technically kind of revealed that in like a shorts that I did recently. Though I have had actually nah. I think I think I did slightly change it, but the more and more I think about it, I think yeah, it's kind of the same as it was. So yeah, I guess in a weird way, yeah, these are my personal top 10 as of right now. Principles of the Lost Crown, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, Helldivers 2, Astrobot, Frostpunk 2, Indiana Jones and the Great Circle, Space Marine 2, Silent Hill 2, Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, and Stalker 2. And then we got a bunch of honorable mentions to go through, and guilty pleasures. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. Actually, as a matter of fact, I just thought of 2 more. So I'll get those working. But while I talk about those, Contra, Operation Galuga, I just kind of liked. I know it was mixed reviewed, but as far as a way forward Contra game is concerned, I thought it was fine, but you know, it was what it is. Thaumaturge, I thought was just kind of an interesting little action adventure game that they did, but nothing too special. Dragon's Dogma 2, I'm having as a guilty pleasure honorable mention here because I think the game is actually fine. So yeah, X Defiant. This one stings because that game's gonna get shut down in like a month from as of this recording. So that one stings because it's not that bad. They just didn't fucking support it. Warno, it's like a real-time strategy game that's like a World War III alternate history thing. Empires of the Undergrowth is spiritual successor to Sim Ant, of all things, which I thought was pretty cool. So yeah. And then Still Wakes the Deep. I thought that was a pretty cool. It was made by the same developers who worked on Amnesia Machine for Pigs. So yeah, it takes place on like an oil rig, which is pretty cool. U-Boat, a spiritual successor to the Silent Hunter series of submarine combat games, which is nice. Arco, which is kind of another strategy game sort of thing, has a cool sort of Wild West art style. Epic Mickey Rebrushed, a remaster of 2010's Epic Mickey. Europa, kind of a cool little like open world action adventure game with a really cool art style. Wayfinder, kind of a cool sort of sci-fi looking RPG that looked cool. Dragon Quest 3 HD 2D 3D remake, it's kind of cool. And I just added these. I can probably tell from behind. I also added in the Alone in the Dark remake, because I thought it was definitely a good update of the 1992 classic. And then I also added this game called Skur Ritual, which is basically a game heavily inspired from Call of Duty Zombies, and it's probably better if you play that than fucking Black Ops 6, because at least there's no AR2 as far as I know. So if you want something that's like Call of Duty Zombies, there you go. We're finally done with the Caspian Game Awards! Like, oh my god. Oh my god. We're so done. We're done. Not that it was like, you know, something that was too stressful, because I still had a lot of fun talking about, you know, the past 35 years for you guys. And I just want to say thank you guys so much for watching, you know, every single one of these episodes, if you guys did, because, you know, I really freaking loved going through talking about a lot of games that I love that not a lot of people have really talked about, or even just discovering a lot of new games that otherwise I wouldn't have known about, and you guys probably wouldn't have known about either. It was definitely one of the most interesting deep dives ever. So, now as far as 2024 itself, yeah, it's actually not that bad of a year. Like, it really wasn't. And honestly, so far with 2025, it's actually been pretty good. So, let's just hope that like by the end of the year, 2025 will actually be a pretty good year. But we'll have to wait until January of 2036 for me to do the next Caspian Game Awards. As from now on, this is just going to be a yearly series for me. I am not going to be doing the 80s because, well, why would I? And no, as much of an interesting dive this was, I think I've decided I am not going to be doing a Caspian Music Awards or a Caspian Animation Awards. Because holy shit, that would take up way too much of my time. But at some point later this year, I will be doing a full-fledged update stream of this, of pretty much everything, every single one of these things. So stay tuned for that. But either way, I hope you guys did enjoy. If you guys can, of course, make sure you guys hit the follow button down below and the bell icon if you're watching this on Twitch. If you're watching this on YouTube, of course, hit this hit the subscribe and the bell icon over there. While you guys are at, check out the links down below. If you want to support me, check out the Throne link down there, or hit the subscribe button over on Twitch. If you can't do that, that's completely fine. I'm just glad you guys come to watch this. But either way, I'll see you guys on the next one. But until then, have a good night and peace out. Bye.